Good morning. So today, with it being Invasive Species Week, we're going to touch on one of our wildlife invasive species that's actually a giant concern across Kentucky as well as most of the United States, and that is wild pigs or feral hogs, uh, wild swine. There's a few names, but it's one that we have a very big concern about in Kentucky. We're kind of on the front lines of their movement north, where they're somewhat established in certain places here, but it's not like it is down south where they're pretty much fully established, widespread across much of the area. So let's get into a little bit about feral pigs, wild pigs. So wild pigs in general. So wild pigs have actually been in North America and the islands for a very long time. Spanish explorers would actually bring pigs with them on their boats and release them on the islands so that there would be a very strong and continuous food supply for those travelers along the way. Christopher Columbus in his second voyage actually had 8 pigs on the ship they would not let the crew consume because of the idea that there needs to be some sort of familiar animal anywhere they went. And they let them go on one of the Canary Islands in 1493 and established a population that they knew there would be a food supply there that they're familiar with if they ever needed it. And the pigs, because of their generalist behavior, would thrive wherever they were brought to. Strangely enough, though, that the populations, even though they were there for hundreds of years, were relatively stable and confined until recently, where things started to pick up. And it's a problem, or things are becoming a problem when they start writing books about dealing with them, which started to happen in the 90s and early into the 2000s, trying to understand and kind of combat wild pigs. And things have kind of progressed further, and this is one of the more recent books on management with a large group of folks that have been very active with dealing with wild pigs for a long time. Well, why do we even care about wild pigs? Well, to be honest, they're in the wildlife world. There's nothing more destructive in terms of invasive species than wild pigs. Annually, it's estimated to be about $1.5 billion in damage and control costs. Now, most of that can be things like crop damage, row crops. They can destroy a 20-acre cornfield in one night. Pasture destruction with rooting. There's disease issues, and we're going to talk a little bit about that here later, as well as potential for direct loss of livestock. Wild pigs are very much carnivores. They will consume and kill calves, sheep, goats, almost anything. Their appetite is they're wide in terms of what they are willing to consume and the ability to consume it. They also potentially carry upwards of 30 different diseases and 40 different parasites. So as these animals are moved around, they are bringing these issues with them. I haven't even touched on the issues with ecosystems and the problems they cause in terms of tree issues. And I mean, all that rooting that they do in fields is also happening in forests, grasslands. The wallows that they create, which are basically these puddles, are maintain consistent damage. They consume native wildlife, game birds, fawns, other nesting birds, destroying habitat, all the above. They're just bad news in general. And as you can see here, there's been a pretty quick progression north, where the areas in blue were their range in 1982. But over the last 25, 30 years, that range has greatly expanded to areas further north up into the New England. We see populations now in North Dakota, up in the UP. So there's been some introductions that have expanded the range of wild pigs significantly. And once they are expanded and take a stronghold, they're very difficult to get rid of. So pigs in Kentucky, a little bit more, we have basically these eradication areas, these priority areas where we have had wild pig populations established in some level, shape, or form. That may be a couple hundred hogs, or it could be a establishing population. So the map in here, the red areas are where we have known pig populations that are fairly significant and well established. So you look at the Lake Cumberland area, Henry County. We have some in eastern Kentucky. The land between the lakes area has some. So we have about 5 or 6 areas, give or take, that are of concern and priority areas for eradication efforts. We want to and have been through cooperative efforts between USDA Wildlife Services, Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife Resources, and many other partners in Farm Bureau, Kentucky Farm Bureau, NRCS, U.S. Forest Service, have been working to shrink that. And actually, we've been winning. It's one of the things we don't get to say very much in wild pig management. We've been winning against pigs in Kentucky, and we're hoping to continue that. So the big thing here is getting folks on board, because one of the main reasons that pigs have spread is this increase in cultural hunting of hogs, where folks that have gone south to hunt hogs have enjoyed it, and then they want to have pig hunting be available to where they live, so they don't have to travel as far to do so. So we see a lot of range expansion has happened with folks that are just open in the back of a trailer, where they have hogs that they may have brought up from the south, or the thing that makes wild pigs so successful is that within 2 generations of being out in the wild, they actually revert back to their feral form. They'll regrow their tusks and are completely basically back to wild pig form and reproduce incredibly fast. So a lot of these expansions have actually happened not because the pigs themselves have moved them, but hunters have moved them. So there's a big effort on trying to keep that in check. And the messaging that we use is, why should we care about this? Why don't we, hunting pigs is for folks is a lot of fun. It's a business down south. Well, it's really, all those things that people hunt. There are folks that want to hunt them. Well, they're going to lose all the things that they traditionally would hunt in this area. So quail populations, turkey populations, deer populations, all of that will decrease when there's pigs in the area, in addition to the issues that we have with forests, with crop damage, and so on. So it's very easy to see why all those partners came together, because of the destruction that pigs can cause. So with that said, there's another big concern with the disease aspect, where we're much more closely related to pigs than we want necessarily to admit. And there's many pig diseases that we can easily contract as humans. It's a concern for those who actually are hunting pigs or encounter them in the wild, or there's a very easy understanding that wild pigs interacting with domestic pigs, there's an easy transfer of diseases there, which is a big concern for our producers. But there's also the human transfer, and there's several of these can be contracted by humans, as you can see in the table here. There's a lot of resources out there on how to deal with that if you are, say, hunting wild pigs, but it's something that, as biologists, we deal with if we're trying to control them as well. My counterpart in Tennessee, I believe, had contracted some issues from wild pigs, and I've had several other friends that when they dealt with them in Texas had issues. So it's many of these diseases that they potentially carry are not good news for us personally, as well as domestic producers of hogs do not want to have them around. So it's another level of destruction and issues associated with them. There's never good news when it comes to invasive species, unfortunately. So all of these impacts and potential impacts are concerning. So how do we manage pigs and deal with them effectively in Kentucky? Well, the biggest thing is, if you see a pig, you want to alert the right people. So you want to be on the lookout for things like tracks. Okay. Well, pig tracks and deer tracks are very similar. And therefore, it can be hard to tell. But if you do see tracks that, you're suspicious about, you may want to report them. That's fine. But one of the best tools we have, and the ways we generally see them show up, are on things like trail cameras, especially around folks that are feeding deer or for hunting purposes or feeding wildlife. They're going to key in on that. And this is a pretty telltale sign. Now, wild pigs generally come in a wide set of colors, but pigs are pigs, and if they're out and showing up on your land, we need to know and deal with them. Usually, there's a couple steps that go into that. So if you start noticing signs that you think may be pigs, or maybe you are seeing pigs, what do you do? Well, first and foremost, we don't want you to shoot them if there's a sounder of pigs. If you see an individual pig, that is a situation where you want to shoot. And the reasoning behind that is that trapping, especially, and organized aerial shooting are the most effective methods we have at controlling populations. And when we're talking about newly establishing populations, it's really important that you trap them all at once. What happens when you shoot into a group of pigs, which is called a sounder, is you may get one or two, but these guys are generally in groups of it might be one or two females and they're piglets. Pigs can have 2 litters a year. Usually averages about 6-ish piglets, upwards of 10. So they can reproduce very quickly. If you shoot into a sounder, you may get 1 or 2 of those pigs, but the rest are then get educated about the situation and therefore usually leave the area. They can go 10, 15 miles away. So you have to find them again. And they're going to be very suspicious of whatever situation you have and human scent in general. So it makes it harder to deal with. And by the time you find them, they may have had another litter, and all of a sudden you have even more pigs to deal with. So the best thing you can do is find the pigs, set up a trap, and catch the entire sounder at once using what we have now are pretty sophisticated cage traps or door traps and fences, where you have complete camera equipment monitoring that trap site 24/7, where the biologists are sitting there looking at their phone at how many pigs are in there, and they count how many pigs they had and make sure they have them all, and they send a text message to the door to close. It's very sophisticated, very efficient. Aerial shooting is the other mechanism. The eastern area of Wildlife Services here runs 5 different helicopter operations separately to go to remove wild pigs, and they work with landowners to get permission to try to shoot on their property, where they can follow the sounder until they make sure that every pig in the sounder is eliminated, and then they go collect them. So these are really important, and the only way they can get to these new pig populations is if you report them. So it's the mechanism, or the saying that they have is report, don't shoot. And we want to make sure that we follow that. And if you have any suspicion at all about pigs on your property, you want to report it. And that's the great thing that we have in place right now is folks that are dedicated to coming out to each of those reports and investigating them with the landowner to make sure that these pigs are not present on the property. And if they are out there trying to remove them, not the landowner themselves. Down south, the structure is so that the landowner has to do a lot of the work. Here we have mechanisms in place where it is USDA Wildlife Services that's doing it, or Fish and Wildlife that's doing it, to aid the landowner. And they're the ones that are running the traps to make sure it's done as efficiently and effectively as possible. So with that said, if you know of any wild pigs or seen any wild pigs, want to make sure that report it. So you can either give that telephone number there, call 1-800-858-1549. That'll put you in contact with the pig biologist, Terry Brunges, at Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife Resources. There's also a wonderful website that they put together, they just updated, that has all kinds of information relative to pigs, diseases, management, what's going on, damage, how to find pigs or identify pigs when they're in the area. If you're interested in finding out more information about any pig diseases, the University of Georgia has a great page there that goes through all of them that are known and concerns and so on associated with each disease. And please, we don't want pigs in Kentucky. It's something that if they do get established, the amount of damage is going to be immense. And there's no there's no way of getting around it. Once they're here, it's very difficult to get rid of them. So please report them if you do see them. And if you have any questions relative to wild pigs or concerns about anything on your property with wild pigs, please don't hesitate to reach out to me as well. If you don't want to go directly to Fish and Wildlife, that's fine. And go ahead and shoot me an email or give me a phone call, mattspringer@uky.edu or 859-257-8633. And I hope everyone has a wonderful day.